Chrono Trigger. This game took the player across space and time itself, fighting against the likes of prehistoric dinosaurs, medieval mages, and planet-consuming giant space fleas. There could be only one hero to rise up and save the world.
And his name is John C.
Wait, wrong clip. Yeah, his name is Crono. Four centuries ago, there was a war underway, a war between the humans and the mystics. The mystics were led by the fiend lord named Magus, and the humans' forces consisted mainly of Guardia's army, but eventually Guardia won out, and the humans enjoyed 400 years of peace. Our story begins 400 years later, in the year of 1000 AD. Crono's origins are mainly surrounded in mystery. However, we do know that he was born to a peasant named Gina in the city of Truce in the year 983 AD. Therefore, during the game's beginning at the Millennial Fair, Crono enters his journey at the tender age of 17. During the fair, Crono ended up meeting Princess Nadia, who was under the disguise of Marley. She decided to tag along with him. Little did they know, their lives would change forever. As fate would have it, Marley ended up getting caught in a portal triggered by Luca's invention, and so Crono embarked on a quest to save her, which led him to the Middle Ages, right in the middle of the War of 600 AD. As Crono discovered new portals, this would lead to so much more, as he teamed up with his childhood friend Luca, an amphibious knight named Frog, a robot from a post-apocalyptic future named Robo, a powerful mage with a dark past named, you guessed it, Magus, and finally, a cave woman named Cave Woman. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Her name was actually Isla. Together, they vowed to defeat the living doomsday weapon known as Lavos before it could absorb the Earth's energy. Enough about his backstory, it's time to go into Crono's weapon of choice, his sword. Crono is a master of swordsmanship, but unlike Frog who uses broadswords, Crono wields the katana. The katana is a curved sword known for its popularity amongst samurai. Crono also carries a scabbard for it, which would be referred to as a saya. The head guard piece is intricately designed as an individual work of art, and is known as the Suba. With Frog's help, Crono has developed several skills to use with his katana. These consist of Cyclone, a spin cut that targets a group of enemies; Whirlwind, a projectile generated from his sword that slashes through multiple targets; Full Slash, a leap attack that hits twice as hard as a regular attack; Chaos Slash, an attack used to speed blitz even the quickest of foes, leaving them in a state of confusion. In the world of Chrono Trigger, magic is composed of Earth's natural elements. Like the rest of the Chrono Trigger party not named Robo or Isla, Crono possesses this powerful magic himself, as granted to him by none other than the god of war himself, Specchio. What, were you expecting a different god of war? Anyways, the four elements are fire, lightning, water, and shadow. Naturally, Crono inherited the power of the heavens, lightning. Thanks to his magic, Crono has natural lightning bolts at his disposal. The average lightning bolt travels at around Mach 440, which is the equivalent of traveling 150 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to reach the Earth's orbit in about 2 seconds. Furthermore, the average lightning bolt is about 30,000 degrees Celsius. Even the surface of the sun is only about 6,000 degrees Celsius. This means that Crono's magic is over 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. His full list of spells includes Lightning, a natural lightning bolt that is summoned to electrocute his enemies. It's also worth pointing out that Chrono is able to combine this spell with Frog to create a Spire attack. By comparing Frog and Chrono's movements to the natural lightning bolts, we can determine that they are moving at over 250 times the speed of sound, or Mach 250. Lightning 2, an upgrade of the first lightning spell. This spell surrounds the field in an omnidirectional lightning bolt, electrocuting everybody within a 10-meter radius of himself. Luminaire, his strongest and most iconic spell. Crono covers everything inside of an electrical field and deals massive damage to every enemy nearby. Since Chrono Trigger is an RPG, a lot of the equipment is customizable. However, by playing through the game and paying attention to detail, it's possible to determine what items Chrono would be the most likely to carry into battle with him. A mystical blade said to be forged of dreams. The Dreamseeker is Chrono's most powerful sword. As for his helmet, Chrono would most likely wear the Vigil hat, which boosts his head's defense and protects him from the all-too-common status alignments, such as poison and confusion. Chrono's body armor would most likely be the Moon Armor, which gives him extra defense against magical attacks and protects him from status alignments, similarly to the Vigil hat. And of course, being an RPG character, Chrono always has an extra accessory lying around, like the Green Dream, which automatically revives him should he die in battle. Among the stranger equipment he can use, there's the Third Eye, which allows him to see into the future, effectively giving him precognition to avoid his enemies' attacks. And of course, there's the ultimate item, the Chrono Trigger itself. The Chrono Trigger is pure potential. By unleashing a specific course of events, it can have a powerful effect on time to the point of freezing it. Pretty powerful for an egg, right? Well, that's because it's not just an egg, but an entire condensed universe. When combined with the Frozen Flame, it gains the power to bend space and time, allowing its owner to reshape all of history. Keep this item in mind, because we'll be coming back to it later. Of course, technique is nothing without strength or speed to back it up. And believe me, Chrono has plenty of that to spare. To determine Chrono's strength, speed, and durability, we will have to look through everywhere from the stated power of his weapons to the feats of his allies and enemies. Let's start by examining the power of weapons in the Chrono Trigger universe. Now, what about Frog's Mass Immune, the most iconic weapon in the game? Frog's Mass Immune is well known for being able to slice through mountains, creating a light that travels thousands of kilometers and disperses a giant cloud. The Mass Immune essentially created a beam that covered 1.5 million square miles. A ray of light with this area would have to produce around 4 terawatts per second, or 4 trillion watts. Since the shine lasts approximately 10 seconds, Frog's Mass Immune must have created over 40 trillion joules of energy to slice the mountain apart. For comparison, the entire population of Earth consumes around 15 terawatts of energy each year, or 15 trillion joules. This means that only about a quarter through the game, Frog and Mass Immune could already hit with enough power to sustain our global energy supply for nearly 3 years straight. Not only that, but the beam was also fast enough to cross the Magic Cave Mountain in only about 1/15 of a second. Since the Magic Cave Mountain is around 1,500 miles in height, that means Frog's beam was covering over 20,000 miles per second, or about Mach 100,000. Which is 100,000 times the speed of sound. To put this into perspective, the speed of light is about Mach 900,000, meaning that Mass Immune could attack at over 10% the speed of light. That's enough speed to go across the entire Earth in under 2 seconds. As for why this scales to Chrono, for those of you who live under a rock, Mass Immune isn't truly a sword, but the fused form of 2 brothers named Massa and Mune. moon. Chrono was able to fight them on even terms after they fused, so this level of strength and speed easily scales to him. Now for an item Chrono himself has access to. Remember the Chrono trigger? Unfortunately, unlike Surge, Chrono never had access to the full power of this reality warping item. However, even without being combined with the Frozen Flame, the Chrono trigger still proved powerful enough to telekinetically affect the moon from Earth. Since the moon is 250,000 miles away, that means the Chrono trigger has enough range to affect all of Jupiter 3 times over, which is a mere 90,000 miles in diameter. It even created a solar eclipse in the span of 10 seconds. To let you know how powerful this is, the moon has a mass of 81 quintillion tons and a diameter of over 2,000 miles. Since it takes 10 seconds to travel that distance, we get a speed close to 800,000 miles per hour. To move the moon at such an insane speed, the Chrono trigger would have to produce over 1 yottaton of TNT equivalent, which is about 1 septillion tons of exploding TNT. How strong is this? For comparison, the strongest bomb ever detonated, the SAR bomb, had a yield of 50 megatons. Try 20 quadrillion of those babies. But I know what some of you are thinking. Chrono can only produce that much power if he has the Chrono trigger, right?
Wrong!
Chrono himself is pretty light on feats. However, there are 2 characters we can analyze to get a solid idea of Chrono's power. To determine Chrono's physical stats, we will start with Lavos, and to determine his magical prowess, we will analyze the power of Queen Zeal. Without further ado, let's look into Lavos. When the party is first introduced to Lavos, we are treated to a scene of him breaking out of the Earth's core and effectively destroying the world. Should you get defeated by Lavos, this also triggers the bad ending, the Day of Lavos. As you can see, Lavos' signature attack is the Rain of Destruction, an apocalyptic attack of biblical proportions that he used to destroy the world. Halfway through the game, the party confronts Lavos despite being horribly outclassed. Lavos' Rain of Destruction ends up destroying the floating continent of Zeal, and the entire party is hit by a wave of it. All of them are knocked out. All of them, that is, except for Crono, who then dies. But then he gets brought back to life by the Chrono trigger because he was important to the space-time continuum, you know the drill. Anyways, just how much power is needed to sink the Zeal Kingdom? Well, the Zeal continent has approximately the same mass as the British Isles, and Lavos knocked it down into the ocean from 10,000 miles high, meaning that the gravitational potential energy of this feat is equivalent to 3.5 petatons of TNT equivalent. That's about 3.5 quadrillion tons of TNT exploding. For reference, the sun hits the Earth with only around 1/3 that much energy each year. Buckle down, folks, because the feats are just going to get crazier and crazier from here on out. By measuring the distance from one continent to another, we can determine that Lavos' Rain of Destruction was able to cross over 7,000 miles in a mere 8 seconds, which makes them over Mach 4,000. Since Crono is able to dodge his Rain of Destruction, this scales to his reaction speed. Lavos is referred to as a planetary destroyer, to the point where even the Earth itself, referred to as the Entity, was unable to directly defeat Lavos and had to send Crono after him in the first place. This is because Lavos powered himself up by absorbing planets in the first place, controlling their evolution for millions of years. In order to accomplish this on Earth, Lavos burrowed into the Earth and absorbed its geothermal energy for 65 million years straight. Geothermal power is considered to be renewable because any projected heat extraction is small compared to the Earth's heat content. That being said, the Earth has an internal heat content of 10 to the 31st power joules, meaning that Lavos absorbed over 2 zetatons of energy. By comparison, the gravitational binding energy of Mercury is only around 400 exatons. tons, meaning that Lavos absorbed enough energy to destroy Mercury half a dozen times over. Remember what I was saying about Lavos burrowing into the Earth? Well, he did it in the first place by colliding with it, because he was the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. Yup, seriously. In real life, the dinosaurs were killed by the KT impact, which caused the Chicxulub crater. Scientists estimate that to cause a crater that size with explosives, they would need 100 trillion tons of TNT. However, Lavos' crash with the Earth was far more destructive than the real-world counterpart. You see, Lavos not only cratered the continent and destroyed an enormous mountain, killing off almost all of the reptites, but also collided into the Earth at 40,000 times the speed of sound. By comparing Lavos to the mountain, we can determine that at this point in time, he was about 200 kilometers in diameter. Treating his body as a hemisphere, we get a volume of 3 million cubic kilometers and a mass of about 10 quadrillion tons. Therefore, Lavos absorbed over 230 zetatons of energy from his collision into the Earth's core. The Earth's gravitational binding energy is only around 60 zetatons, meaning that Lavos at this point in time had enough durability to survive an attack capable of destroying the Earth exactly 4 times over. No kill like overkill, but after 65 million years, Lavos grew to be bigger and more powerful than before, all thanks to absorbing energy from both the Earth and the Zeal Kingdom. He doubled in size, becoming around 500 kilometers in diameter. Once again, we can treat him as a hemisphere, which gives us a volume of over 200 million cubic kilometers and a mass of over half a quintillion tons. Just by waking up, Lavos rose out of the Earth's core in 5 seconds flat. To give you an idea of the speed, Earth's core is over 6,000 kilometers deep, meaning that Lavos moved at nearly Mach 4,000, despite his enormous size. The kinetic energy of this feat would be in the ballpark of 100 zetatons. But wait, there's more. Notice those floating rocks Lavos dislodges? Well, by comparing them to Lavos himself, we can determine that they were about as wide as the United Kingdom, and he launched them at over Mach 30,000. Therefore, for each rock, he would have to be exerting around 800 zetatons. Considering that he launches 3 of those giant rocks at once, and several smaller rocks, we can approximate this to about 2 yotatons of TNT equivalent. Combined with Lavos' own kinetic energy, we get 2.5 yotatons. How impressive is this? Well, the gravitational binding energy of Uranus is about the same, 2.5 yotatons of TNT exploding. And here's where things get crazy. Lavos did all of this just by waking up. This means Lavos, just by waking up, released enough energy to destroy a large planet. And this was Lavos' weakest form. Why does this scale to Chrono, you ask? Well, that's because he not only broke Lavos' shell, but also fought his final form in a battle so epic it bent space and time itself. Literally. Considering all the timeline shenanigans in the series, it's easily possible for Crono to defeat Lavos on his own without any help from his party members. And considering that one of Crono's weapons is a mop, that means there is a timeline out there where Crono defeated the Destroyer of Worlds with nothing more than a janitor's tool. Yes, he killed a planet buster with a mop. Now that we know everything there is to know about Lavos' power, and by proxy Crono's physical prowess, let's take a look at Queen Zeal. Queen Zeal was powerful enough to rule over the Zeal Kingdom, and her title isn't just for show. Feeling that magic users were superior to regular humans, she banished all normal humans to the Mountain of Woe. But to make sure they wouldn't escape, she sealed the mountain with her magic, causing it to float for years until Crono defeated her guardian Gigagaia, which caused the mountain to once again collapse. How impressive is it to levitate a mountain, you ask? Well, first, we must determine the size. Considering it was big enough to hold most of the world's population, we know it was far larger than an average mountain. By comparing the Mountain of Woe to the world map, we can determine that it's over 3,000 kilometers wide and just as high. Therefore, the volume would be in the ballpark of 10 billion cubic kilometers. The mountain weighs in at a whopping 24 quintillion tons. By comparison, the moon weighs about 80 quintillion tons, meaning that Queen Zeal manipulated an object with over a quarter of the moon's mass. But it gets better than that. For the speed, we can use radius divided by time. Since it would swing its radius every second, this means it was traveling at 4,500 times the speed of sound. The kinetic energy of this feat would come out to over 6 yielditons of TNT equivalent. The energy needed to blow up Neptune is just over 4 yielditons of TNT equivalent. This means that Queen Zeal's magic can destroy large planets like Neptune, but what about the speed of her spells? Well, to determine this, we'll look at her most precious construction, the Black Omen. This giant ship hovers in space and is highly visible from Earth. Once Queen Zeal is defeated, she does the only logical thing and destroys the entire ship. Since the ship is located in space, and low Earth orbit is 320 kilometers above the surface, that means her spell traveled 200 miles in only 1/6 of a second. This makes her magical travel speed in the ballpark of Mach 6000, which is 50 times faster than NASA's Juno spacecraft. Since the entire party surpassed Queen Zeal in magical prowess by the end of the game, this definitely scales to Chrono. However, the absolute best feat that scales to Chrono isn't from Chrono Trigger, but rather Chrono Cross. You see, there is an element in the game known as Meteor, available even in the early stages of the game. It's a relatively low-level attack, and is used by fodder characters in the game. The attack involves moving giant meteors at 30,000 times the speed of sound. The average meteor moves only around 32 times the speed of sound. The energy needed to pull 2 meteors this large at such insane speeds is no lower than 325 yielditons of TNT equivalent. The energy needed to destroy Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, is 483 yielditons of TNT equivalent, meaning that just a few of these attacks would be enough to level Jupiter. Not bad for a porcupine-haired teenager, huh? Before we move on to how Chrono stacks up against characters from other universes, we must analyze specifically what he has special defenses against. First of all, it's worth pointing out that Chrono has immense resistance to telekinesis and telepathy. This is evident from his fight with Azella. Azella was the leader of the Reptites, capable of controlling entire different species, such as the Tyrannos. She used attacks such as telekinetic meteors, telepathy, and psychokinesis in an attempt to mind-screw the party. However, Chrono is able to resist it, and depending on his equipment, he is outright immune to telepathic attacks from her and other enemies who inflict the Confusion status alignment. So, unless your telepathy is at an extraordinary level, you aren't mind-screwing Chrono. Secondly, during the final battle against Lavos, Lavos was outright bending space and time itself in the battle against the party, yet Chrono was able to resist his attacks. So, unless your spatial manipulation is powerful enough, that's not working on Chrono either. With that out of the way, let's get to comparing. In the Marvel Universe, Chrono would most likely be one of the more powerful metahumans in Earth 616. He has a large amount of special abilities and raw stats to put him pretty high up on Marvel Earth's food chain, and he would be more than a match for the street levelers, as well as many of the mutants and metahumans. If I had to place him somewhere specific, I'd say he beats the brawlers like Thing, Greyhawk, and She-Hulk with minor difficulty, but he comes just short of Herald level, likely having a close fight with somebody like the Human Torch. In a DC, it's hard to think of somebody who would be a fair match for Chrono, as most of the characters either get stomped by him or curb stomp him in return. However, outside of the mainstream DC universes, we can look to spin-offs such as the DC Animated Universe and Elseworld titles. In my opinion, the most fair match for him in the comics would be Red Sun Superman, who survived the destruction of Brainiac's ship which could have destroyed the moon from 15 million miles away, and flew through the solar system in a matter of minutes. Another fair match for him would be the cast of the Teen Titans cartoon, as Starfire was able to tank a large planet-busting explosion and fly faster than light. Most likely, he would be able to defeat Starfire with difficulty, but lose to White Raven and Trigon. Since Crono was designed by Akira Toriyama, it only makes sense to compare him to other Toriyama characters. Of course, there's a large gap in power between who Crono can beat and who he would lose to. However, if I had to place him somewhere, I'd say he's above the Ginyu Force, but below Frieza, with the first Toriyama character capable of beating him being, say, Arrow from Dr. Slump. But of course, the comparison everyone was waiting for. How would Crono do if he changed places with other Square Enix characters? Let's start with Secret of Mana, since Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana originally began as the same game. The Mana Sword, being a reality warping sword that works on a planetary scale, would no doubt give Chrono trouble if in the hands of the right user. However, the Secret of Mana cast is highly lacking in speed, with the best speed feats only being around Mach 6000. Furthermore, the best durability feats top out at around town level, meaning that they would barely be able to keep up with Crono even at the time he defeated Masamune. Simply put, despite the raw power, it lacks other stats to keep up with the Chrono Trigger cast, so it's safe to say Crono would clear the verse. What about Dragon Quest? I touched up on that a bit earlier, but in my opinion, the power disparity between Dragon Quest high tiers and top tiers is too large to definitively place Crono anywhere. However, I would say the strongest character he can beat is Erdrick, the main character from Dragon Quest III, mainly due to Chrono's large advantage in power and speed. The weakest Dragon Quest character to defeat Crono would most likely be Corvus, a being who is able to create stars and fly at massively faster than light speeds. Yeah, Crono certainly isn't touching that. And of course, for the finale, Final Fantasy. Say that 5 times fast. Final Fantasy is a huge franchise. I could be here all day talking about where Chrono stands in the series, but to save time, I'll just mention the 3 key games Chrono Trigger gets compared to: Final Fantasies 4, 6, and 7. The Final Fantasy 4 cast actually has pretty even speed with Chrono, and the most powerful feat, the creator moving the moon, is comparable to Chrono's. If Chrono faces them all at once, he would most likely fail, but if he takes it gauntlet style, I can see him taking the verse one-on-one. For Final Fantasy 7, he usually gets compared to Cloud, but I actually believe Zack versus Chrono would be the most fair fight. Zack was able to defeat Bahamut Fury, a being who ejected the moon at subrelativistic speeds and was able to fly faster than the speed of light. With that in mind, Zack is powerful enough to keep up with Chrono, and in my opinion, would win more often than not. This puts Chrono in the Crisis Core tier, certainly not on the level of, say, Cloud or Vincent or Sephiroth, sadly. And finally, Final Fantasy VI. In terms of raw stats, he's about twice as fast as most of the cast, but his powers are nothing new to the universe, and his strength is about even with them. Like with Final Fantasy IV, he could get pretty far, possibly clear if it's one-on-one, but he can't take them all at once. Versus Terra would be an exceptionally close fight, with it all coming down to the Esper form. If Chrono can outlast the Esper form, in my opinion, he wins. It's truly a close match that could go either way. And that's all I've got to say about Chrono. Thanks a lot for watching, and be sure to tune in for the next PowerCrunch video. This is Proto saying, peace out everyone.